we hack the code and flip the tag. Where cliches come to retire. Drop that beat, turn down to fire. Say what's real, make fears take a seat. Unconventional wisdom, dancing on your feet. Hey.
Hello, welcome to Unconventional Wisdom about conventional wisdom. I am your host, Kim Miller-Hershon. I am here with my guest today, Mike Chaput. He runs an IT company. He's going to tell us about it. So, Mike, I'm going to hand it over to you and tell us about your business.
Kim, thanks for having me on, and thanks for the attention of your viewership. The brief story about me, boy, what can I tell you? So I'm a husband, a dad. I have two boys. Most people are interested in my business. I'm on my second one. My first one I started when I was 24. It went bankrupt 4 years later, which is a fun story that sometimes people get into. But I started this company right following the bankruptcy with my same business partner, my old college roommate. It's called nSight. It's an IT managed services company. The quick skinny on that is companies pay us a monthly fee to take on the IT function. We're mostly in California, so we do business in the Bay Area, Napa Valley, and then we're also in SoCal, so we're in San Diego, Orange County, mostly down there. And then we have this crazy kind of fun vertical and legal, which has brought us out to Hawaii. So we have a bunch of Honolulu law firms and of course Bay Area and SoCal law firms as well. So that's a little bit about the business. Maybe the headline is we've been on the Inc. 5000, I think 10 times now, which is fun. And then, yeah, we're about 150 like national employees. We have some international non-employee labor as well, but that's our national laborers. And it's about 35 million in revenue. So in our space, most of the industry is very small. So outside of kind of the third party kind of private equity roll-ups, we're one of the larger national founder-led MSPs in the country.
Very cool. Okay, so I have a random question for you.
Okay, shoot.
That is, where's your favorite place to travel?
That's a fun one for me. So the fun part about it is I actually wrote this song about, I want to say the place, but it's really the places. And so when I was really broke in my early 20s, my father would pony up for my brother's family and my family to bring us to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico for the week of New Year's. He had a timeshare down there and the whole clan would come in. Even as we had kids, it just kept getting bigger. So we kept going out of Puerto Vallarta, Mexico every year. It became like an epic thing, decades. And so that's certainly one of my favorite spots in the world, just because I proposed to my wife down there and a whole bunch of other things. But then in 2012, I took my first sabbatical where I took 4 weeks off professionally. This is after grinding for decades and finally having my business in a spot where I could allow that, where I had enough money to do this. And we took our family of four to a place called San Sebastian, Spain, which if you don't know that part of the region, it's basically on the kind of the north coast of Spain, right near the French border of France. And so the song I wrote was, I think we ought to go to Puerto Vallarta. And then the next line is, or San Sebastian, Spain. And then the whole song is comparing what I love about these two cities and going back and forth. And it's kind of a fun thing. And then I started learning Spanish real late in life. I didn't take it in high school. And obviously both of those are Spanish speaking spots. So it gives me a chance to play with my rudimentary Spanish skills. And yeah, so that's that.
So are you going to sing the song?
At some point, maybe not on this podcast, but yeah, I do sing it. I do. My wife likes it. So it's like kind of a Jack Johnson, kind of acoustic guitar, almost a little island vibe riff. But yeah.
Oh, that's very fun. My husband and I actually have a trip to Puerto Vallarta planned for February. So we'll have to hit you up and find out where the cool spots are to go.
100%. I'm your
Okay.
guy.
All right. I love that. All right. So let's jump into the content of the podcast. And I really think that I'm quite excited to hear what you think about these things. You've got a big company and a lot of people that report to you. So what's a piece of conventional wisdom that you followed early on only to realize later on that it just was not right for you?
Oh man, I'm actually on a bender to try to clear this up with the world, to be honest. So I'm a big, let's say, advocate for leading with a vision-centric leadership and value-centric. So that means that I believe that the leader needs to be the first follower of an
Mhm.
externalized vision and value board. So people shouldn't just follow the leader because leaders are human, very fallible things, but when you get your vision right, it's a collective effort. You have a bunch of people weigh in and you all buy in. And now the leader can put themselves into a followership of the vision and value statement. So I'll just start with saying that's a fundamental building block with which I'll answer the question from. I've been on this journey reading everybody who knows anything about this topic since I was in my 20s. And the one of the very first books I read about it was from a very famous author, Jim Collins. Love this guy. I've read everything he's ever written. I can't remember how many, 6 or 7 books, plus all of his online stuff. Plus, I followed a bunch of YouTube speaking of his. I really admire him, but I think he got something slightly misdirected in the book Built to Last. So when he studied these companies in the Built to Last book with
Mhm.
Jerry Porras, he determined that these built to last companies had the same set of values for the lifetime of the leader. And the implication
Mhm.
was that your value should last the lifetime of the leader. And I think that might be true in Jim's data set and built to last. So I'll qualify this. If your company is as successful as the built to last companies, don't change your values. But if your company is struggling to find its rhythm and try to figure out what it's trying to do and how to grow and try to reach the next step, I just think it's absolutely critical that the culture lever be one of the levers that you can iterate. And the values are essentially the mechanism for making explicit what your culture is. Culture is the way people behave when nobody's looking. It's the value system that people unite at the top. It's how people treat each other. And the values are just, it's very simple. They're just the way of externalizing that and making it explicit. Otherwise, you have a culture and it's just implicit. But this is a way of making it explicit. And if you can't, as a leader, make slight pivots and changes to improve your culture or to improve your cultural alignment over time, I think that's a huge area of leadership that you're just leaving off the table. And so that
Mhm.
I have this view of the world that you have a business strategy, which is the vision, and then you have your values, which are your operating system, your execution engine. So if your
Mhm.
values are the right ones, then those behaviors will manifest your vision. And if they're the wrong ones, they'll manifest something else. And you have to work both of these levers simultaneously to get them aligned, to get them to the right spot. And if you're not achieving your vision, you might look at maybe our vision isn't ambitious enough, or it's too ambitious, or the market doesn't need it, or it's not in service enough, or there's something wrong with the vision. We got to go back there. Or it's like, no, we love the vision's perfect. It's our execution engine that's wrong. Like people aren't doing the things that are really necessary to manifest the vision. So then you got to look at your value stack. So one of the tools that I use all the time is if something's happening in our company that's, let's say, we don't think is going to help us manifest our vision with it. My first question every time I get consulted, is it the values are improper, or is it that we're just not living properly the values? And
Right.
through that lens, almost always, because we've worked on our values for decades and stuff, we don't need to iterate the values. It's actually, no, it's right there in the value. Here's where it is. Our values are at a kind of hierarchical in nature. So it starts with a group of letters, RSVP. Then those letters stand for something like the R stands for respect and connect, and the S stands for servant's heart, for example. And then there's bullet points. There's 5 or 6 bullet points for each of them that describe what they mean. And then there's
Mhm.
a library of books underneath those bullets that really unpack what those simple bullets mean.
Mm.
And so a lot of times it might just be a misunderstanding of the core library of materials. And so some education needs to be done, or maybe the leader needs to read the book so that they fully understand what that bullet means. But usually for us, it's our philosophical principles are right, and it's just our understanding or execution of them or governance of them are improper. But in the scenario where it's just not in here, like we're behaving this way, then it would be like, okay, we either need to add a bullet, we need to add a book to our library, we need to consider change. So the bottom line is, I really think it's setting people up for mediocrity to leave their
Mm.
Values is something that they'll never touch in their lifetime as a leader. First of all, when you put in the values, you were a different leader. Hopefully, you're reading all the time, you're growing, and then you get to a spot where you're wiser and you realize that there might be something that's missing or could be improved about the value set, and now they're stuck in stone. So that's the one that I think
Mhm.
is just misconstrued. People, they fall in love with their values. It's great to have humility as a leader, such that maybe you didn't get it right. Let's go look at it. Like maybe there's something that could be improved there, and leave it open for iteration like everything else.
I like that too, because then you're not putting yourself on a pedestal and always saying that I'm sure we got this right without questioning it, right? Then it's always about somebody else. I think by putting everything on the table, then you can figure out where the work needs to be done. And sometimes it's in more than one place. The other thing that comes up for me in this, which I always think is an interesting thing when we get down those levels, is how do I understand that value, right? As a leader, as a worker in the company, right? What respect looks like to you and what respect looks like to me might we might define those in different ways. And I always think that's interesting to think about. If we have a value of respect, what does that mean about how we treat our coworkers? What does that mean on how we treat the janitor? What does that mean on how we treat oftentimes the respect always goes up, right? Because your job is on the line otherwise, right? But how does it translate to your customers? What does respect look like?
It's all of it. And certainly it means different things to different people. The solution to that is your implementation. They
Right.
say operationalizing the value. So what that looks like at nSight is it starts with recruiting and the way that we try to find people for our collective who already come in somewhat inclined, where they would say maybe they don't act that way all the time, but if they're really honest about like the best version of themselves would be that, like it would be
Mhm.
their idealistic goal, so that when they come here, they can just be more of who they really want to be anyway. So you find people like that, and then you orient them. I do a cohorts of new hires, and we take 2 hours to go through the core values, and I explain to them what they mean at nSight, and then we have literally a daily rhythm of people recognizing each other. So it's not a leader, staff, or frontline worker. It's everybody to everybody all the time trying to find these values in action and then recognizing them. And then we tell stories about them in every all hands meeting, which we do 8 of those a year, where we pick somebody to highlight on one of the value sections, and we basically explain the context and what happened, and then we recognize them with praise. Usually the whole it's done digitally, so you get all the hand claps and hearts coming up. If you're not trying to make them clear in a bunch of different ways, even when we start our meetings, we start every meeting with something called good news, which is basically just a form of recognition. So we talk about people who are crushing it, good things that have happened, and then we spread on the recognition. And this does something else, by the way, totally unrelated to the values thing, but having a praise or recognition based culture. Now, it's great when they're aligned about your values, but just in general, if you can see people doing good things and tell them that, then you increase the meaning that they take away from their work. Nothing's more draining than digging a hole and filling it back up. It's just when you're doing work that people really appreciate and they tell you, hey, I really appreciated that. There's like a there's an emotional compensatory thing that occurs. It's that feels a lot better to do work people like. And there's actually studies. It gets crazy. It's like people do like really hard intellect. You can imagine like a lawyer. They've trained their entire life to do this. They're doing the very difficult work, but the client might, it's paying them a lot of money, so they don't really feel the need to thank them or compliment them. But then they bring somebody coffee in their office, and that person's really appreciative, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, thanks for this coffee." And the thing that the lawyer feels the best about all day was bringing the coffee, the thing that they got like verbally appreciated for, not the thing that they trained their entire life that's creating loads of economic
Right.
values. So recognizing people, telling them you appreciate them, helps them feel meaning and purpose in their work. And the reality is, we often do appreciate people, like we really do, but maybe we come from childhood of origin where verbal affirmation wasn't a thing and we're uncomfortable with it. And it's my advice to anybody listening is get over that, because It's like the most important thing you can do as a leader is to make people feel seen and heard. And there's a bunch of ridiculous ideas and stories that you tell yourself, oh, if I appreciate somebody, maybe they're going to know how valuable they are. They're going to go somewhere else. It's like, no, they won't. First of all, if they're valuable, they're going to go somewhere else anyway. But if you're not paying them a fair market raise, but they're definitely going to want to work for the person that sees them and appreciates them. That's so there's just ridiculous things that happen. But yeah, so that's
Yeah, yeah. Okay, good.
going to stump on something else.
All right. So, as a successful leader, what's one thing that people assume that you've got figured out that internally you still wrestle with?
The hard part about that question is narrowing things down to one. There's all kinds of stuff. At the end of the day, it's funny because you see somebody who's from the outside, maybe you think they're very successful. They, like, for example, I have this business that I founded and I have a successful boy who's in college or whatever. But every day is a constant struggle to just stay centered and double down on the things the good habits that I've tried to cultivate over the years. One thing, boy, I just wish I had a clearer answer to that. I don't know that I can narrow down to even one thing.
So, think about maybe a better way to ask the question for you is you are somebody who reads a lot and you're constantly learning. So, what is one thing that your either personal development or in your leadership that you're working on right now?
Yeah, okay. So I got into leadership and the business front like really early. I was 24. And like it's very hard for me to like remember what that it was like exactly, but I have a 22-year-old son now and he has got a bunch of 22-year-old friends and I just think about how ridiculous it was. Like I was literally the CEO with a capital table and debt and payroll to make. I had never sold anything. I had never managed anybody, and I had 15 people who were reporting it into the organization chart. It was absurd, right? I didn't really know how to read a balance sheet very well. Profit and loss was intuitive, but I was just completely overwhelmed. And so I spent so much time just like learning kind of everything that I was reading was like business, it was accounting. And then, by the way, we were selling IT services at that point in time. And even though I had a computer engineering degree, it wasn't the same. They didn't teach routing and switching, and they didn't teach email platforms at college. So I was also learning a whole technical domain. So I just was so overwhelmed with the volume of missing knowledge that I had. And let's say, cultivated a habit on learning on the dimension of business. And what I wasn't focused on is learning about the dimension of kind of life or the existential, like the missions and like why are we here? What are we doing? What makes for a good life in general? And as I got older and maybe across some kind of basic success on the business front, and once I started thinking about such matters, I realized what an adjacency they had to my success in business because the, let's see, how would you say this? When the leader's motive is really low on Maslow's hierarchy. So you think they're trying to provide for their family. If that's where the leader's at down here, it's very difficult for other human beings to want to sign up to that mission because that's just not what they're going to spend their life trying to do is make sure that you're financially viable for your family. So that's really what you'd want to do at an individual. Like if you're leading a team, your mission needs to be something high enough or inclusive enough that it's going to draw on the motive for others. So you have to transcend your own individual, selfish, low on the hierarchy, basic human needs and get to something more existential in nature. And mostly now I'm like really interested in philosophy. And I think that's just like insanely helpful as a leader because if you could think bigger and think grander and not be, let's call it self-centered, there's a really interesting like philosophical or psychological point here, which is the more you think about yourself, the less happy you are. This is well documented in psychological literature. In fact, so much so that when patients come in with symptoms like anxiety and depression, they can't say, stop thinking about yourself all that often because they won't do it. But they can direct them to go help somebody else. And almost always, if the patient is willing to go and serve somebody else, that they feel immediately better. I would even say it this way. One of the philosophical people who I've found on the internet was talking about the night sky. It is an astronomer. And basically what they were saying is that when people look at the night sky, they're reminded of how small they are. It's an ego
Mhm.
reducing it's an ego reducing activity, kind of like looking at the ocean or the mountains or something like that, except the night sky is unique because everybody has access to it. And that brings their sense of ego down. And probably everybody's experienced this. There's like a calming sense of peace that you get when you're in a forest or when you're looking at the ocean or when you're because you're reminded about your problems are like you live for a very small amount of time. You're really not that important. And there's like huge things out there. And then that actually is a peaceful state. So I think there's a big implication on leaders. If leaders can really reduce ego and remind themselves in a kind of somewhat perpetual way that there's things a lot more important than they are, and if they can focus on those things, they reduce the resistance to followership. So the things I'm working on now are really philosophical. Like I do a lot more meditating as I'm older, things that keep me centered, and just try to focus on bigger picture, more existential ideas and much less focus on, I don't know, what would you say, a personal goal. This is what I want for me or my family. That's way less interesting to me now as I'm older and maybe I have a little bit more and can send those kind of motives.
All right, cool. All right. If you could rewrite the rule book on leadership, what's one outdated belief that you'd throw away and what would you replace it with?
Maybe I will rewrite a book on leadership. That question's a little hard for me to answer exactly as asked because I really view myself as somebody who's built my beliefs on the foundation of a whole bunch of thought leaders who I really admire and respect. And I view my role as to be the integrator of many great ideas and somebody who maybe not just integrates, but maybe can, as an implementer of a bunch of these ideas, can bring subtle insight to areas that maybe were left a little less clear from other folks. I guess that if I think about it there, we're like, where are the kind of the missing spaces where there's just, it's not clear enough. And a lot of leaders who I know have figured out that they need to externalize vision and values. There's a bunch of systems for this. The first one I used was Vern Harnish's Rockefeller Habits. He's got a one-page business plan. He's got a company called Gazelles. I met him, gosh, when I was really young in my 20s. He spoke at an EO event in San Francisco, and we've been using that tool for a long time. And then Gino Wickman's EOS caught fire, and I just can't. It's like I've lost count of all the people who I know who maybe they sold their business and now they're an implementer of EOS or they're using an implementer, they're using EOS systems. And I think that these systems are great, but I think that a lot of people are looking at them as, okay, I need to fill out this form, and they don't spend enough time thinking about why they're doing that. And without understanding why that stuff, then if it's not working perfectly, it's really hard to troubleshoot. It's kind of like a computer. If a reboot doesn't work, then you're like stuck. It's like a great action, but unless you really understand the computer, it's hard to troubleshoot it if it goes beyond a reboot. And so sometimes people will have EOS and they'll hit a plateau and they'll be like, I don't know why I'm hitting a plateau. And then my answer would be, it's because you don't fully understand how and why the vision values work and how and why they don't. And if you don't understand how and why they work and why they don't, it's going to be very difficult for you to troubleshoot them. And it's a complicated topic that requires lots of time to get into, but a vision is ultimately an exercise in distillation. So every one of them has this concept, which Jim Collins, again, the same guy, popularized in the book Good to Great, called a big, hairy, audacious goal. And to me, that's kind of like the pinnacle statement of the vision. It's like at the very top of a hierarchical structure with which to distill. Another thought leader who I really like, his name is Arthur Brooks, by the way. He's a Harvard Business School professor. He has a really cool podcast called Office Hours. And he likes to think of it as a rum line. So a rum line is what sailors use to calculate their destination path from where they are to where they're going. And the reason why I like this topic is because some sailors necessarily have to sail the wind. So they have to go off the path towards their BHAG from times and then tack back to it. And this represents the way a BHAG works. You might have lost a big customer and you might be just trying to save revenue for now, and you're tacking off like your long-term ambition just because you need to get financially healthy so that you can tack back on. There's plenty of things like, oh, there's an M&A and We have a quality mission like an nSight, and the M&A kind of makes things messy at first, but in the long run, it gives us a scale with which we can deliver superior service going forward. So it looks like we're tacking off, but if we hold on to the rum line, we can tack back. So this would be an example of understanding the BHAG as a guiding post out in time, but it can't necessarily, it's not close enough to where you're currently at to drive every single decision in the day to day. And then underneath there, you have 5-year targets. And what should a target be? Should it be specific? Should it be a bucket? There's an exercise in distillation. So, necessarily you need to communicate these ideas quickly. So that needs to be a sentence. But then there needs to be like a long form explanation of what you mean by that and how you're going to get there. And then nobody can build a BHAG. So eventually you have to cascade every single thing down from the BHAG, 5-year targets, 1-year targets, quarterly targets, and then all the way down to what does Kim have to do on Monday morning such that we're building to this BHAG. I often use a construction example to basically say, if you look at the front of blueprints, you'll see a beautiful picture rendering of the building or home you're going to do. And you can't hand that to a carpenter and be like, build this. And so what happens in a blueprint is underneath there's a plumbing detail and a structural detail and electrical detail. And then in those details, it's like, what is the switch going to be on the wall? Is it going to be one of those old switches that you turn up and down? Is it going to be one of those digital switches that you do? Is it going to be some home automation? So the level of detail from paint color to tiles and all that stuff has to be in the blueprint as well. And if you think about your business plan as a set of blueprints, then you can ask yourself, do we have the paint color? Do we have the tiles selected here? What's the structural plan? That might be the marketing. What's the electrical plan? That might be the sales. What's the plumbing plan? That might be one of your operational areas or whatever. Each of them have to have a set of details. And if you really want to build a great company with a great vision, you have to have a great BHAG, a uniting principle that unites everything below it. But just like with the construction, if you want to manifest it, then it's literally got to be to the details of what you're going to do this week, this quarter, this week, and all the way to what do we have to do today. And that's where people can impact your detail. And if you get it there, then you can have all 150 people engaged in the building of this beautiful building that you want. And by the way, they're going to feel a lot better because, they're going to go from feeling a little bit more like cogs in a machine, if that's all they're doing, to being builders. And everybody wants to be a builder to some degree. That's going to make work a lot more interesting and a lot more fun if they're a part of manifesting the vision versus just a cog trying to crank out another good quarter or something like that. That's really not that interesting to the front line as being a part of manifesting something that's exciting.
So, what's one unconventional habit or mindset shift that's helped you grow your business?
One unconventional habit or
Mindset
mindset.
shift.
Okay, so I think I know what I want to talk about. Maybe it's becoming more conventional, but I'll tell you my story about it. When I was doing all this reading in my 20s, I had an hour-long commute to work, and I grew a habit of doing audiobooks. And I would literally, I was part of this EO in San Francisco. I talked to anybody who had a good book recommendation. And if didn't have any good book recommendations, I'd go into Barnes and Noble or Borders bookstore, and I'd go to the audio business section. I would just buy books and I would listen to them. And I came across this book. It's a very famous book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And I thought it was a terrible book, to be honest. At the time, I just wasn't in a mental space ready for it. It was on this manifesting dimension. It was like the idea was if you think, then you can grow rich. And I didn't understand it. It felt very hocus pocusy to me. And then I just quickly ignored the ideas in the book and went on with my life. And then a handful of years later, I met a gentleman who became a serious mentor to me. And he had a great business in my field, and I really wanted to know what he knew. And one of the tools that he gave me was these kind of what I would call like self-affirmation cards. You like wrote these statements about yourself when you were at your best, and you would read them every day. And I looked at it and I'm like, that sounds a lot like that Napoleon Hill
Mm.
guy that I read a long time ago, but he swore by it. And so I made my cards. I read them to him, and he's, that's perfect. You've nailed this exercise. Just do that. And then I had this bankruptcy and this trials in business, and it was very stressful all along the way. And I started to manifest some health issues. I had irritable bowel And that's, I think, just an effect of being in fight or flight and not being in rest and digest too much. And I started seeing I went through this Western medical kind of thing, and they didn't really do anything to help at all. But I ended up going to this naturopathic doctor who told me I should be doing affirmations. And I'm like, wait a minute, that sounds familiar. So I took the same kind of concept to my health, and lo and behold, the symptoms almost completely vanished. And what I've learned since then is like the quote unquote the placebo effect. Doctors talk about it as if it's like some kind of like as if it's bad. It's like, oh, that's just a placebo effect. It's without acknowledging just how insanely powerful the mind is to
Mhm.
manifest in the real world. And so now that I'm older, I understand how this works. I didn't understand how it worked. I was like back to the vision and values, like understanding how it works and the belief in it. So the way this works is when you set an intention. So when you set a target or a goal, it literally changes how you perceive the world. At a very basic level, we could be having dinner and we're sitting at a table. And because we want to eat, the table becomes a shelf for our food. But as soon as we want to leave, the table becomes an obstacle with which we have to navigate around. It's in our path. It's in the way. And so are the chairs. So their function to us completely changes on the basis of our goal. So when we set a target for ourselves, the conversations we have with people change. What we pause on our social reels and just kind of are slightly interested in change because we have this new target that our reticular activation system, our memory goes, hey, wait, maybe this can help me with my target. And we pause. And as we pause on that social reel, guess what it does? The machine language algorithm says, you're interested in that content. Maybe we'll show you more content like that. Literally, the world that we see transforms on the basis of these targets that we set in ways that we're completely impossibly aware of. So somebody who we might have ignored, we have a conversation with. And the conversation we have with them, the questions we ask are completely different on the basis of our affirmation statements. What we view online, totally different on the basis of our affirmation statements. It sounds vaporware-ish. I'm just going to write down what I want and then read it. And it's like, that's not doing anything, but it's actually doing so much more than you can possibly imagine. So I spent a lot of time really considering what the goal should be, both in business and in life, because I understand that you might hit the target that you set and you might not want that target. You might not understand what that target entails. So really spend some time really thinking about what it is that you want. And then if you really want that, write it down. There's self-authoring exercises. There's a ton of data on this, but so there's a bunch of great science kind of proving these concepts. But so I think the most unconventional thing is I spent a lot of time, less time probably than people think, working with my hands or my mouth or whatever on things and just really working in my mind on trying to know what I'm trying to accomplish or what I'm trying to make manifest in the world. And I think probably most people are spending too little time doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. One last question for you. It's a two-parter.
Okay, I'm ready.
So many leaders battle with imposter syndrome. And if you don't love the term imposter syndrome, it's self doubt or a lack of confidence, however you want to define it. So, two parts. One, if it's going to show up for you, what's the circumstance where it's going to show up? And then, second of all, how do you get yourself back to neutral or back to forward motion?
Maybe if you don't have imposter syndrome, you've got a humility problem. So I think you have a problem on either side. Either you've got imposter syndrome and maybe it's eating away your self-confidence, or on the other side, you have a humility issue and it's going to eat at your ability to develop because you're not going to be able to see your necessary areas of growth. To me, I look at it as like a road you're trying to drive down where you're not trying to swerve across the lane into self-doubt. That's not really actually a good place to live. But on the other side of the lane is the overconfidence and hubris, and you're not trying to swerve in that side of the lane either. So it's important to drive down the center of the lane. Since you asked specifically, let's say about the left side of the lane on the self-doubt side, it's funny because I get up and speak to my entire company 8 times a year. Every time you do that, or for example, maybe some of them are going to watch this podcast. Every time you get up and speak at all, you're placing yourself out there for a bunch of people who you rely on for their support and their camaraderie and all that kind of stuff to basically be like, what am I doing following this guy. Like there's got to be a better leader to go align with than this guy over here with his crazy ideas and all this stuff. So you put yourself out there to have everybody just throw in the towel and leave you every time you talk or open your mouth. And you might think you're better off just hiding away in a closet so that you don't run. It seems people are working every day right now. All I can do is say something that's going to really piss them off. And one of the things I just kind of remind myself is this isn't my first rodeo. My company somehow survived the idiot 30 something version of myself, and then the idiot late 30s version, and then the idiot 40s version, and then the idiot whatever. And so now I'm 50. If it survived those idiot versions of myself, it's going to be able to survive the current idiot version of myself now. And I made mistakes all the way along, and I'm going to make mistakes again. And somehow we manage through, and that's how you grow. So the RSVP, one of the P stands for progress over comfort. So I try also to align to some philosophy that pushes me outside of my comfort zone. It doesn't feel like the safest thing to do, go on public and go into YouTube and talk about your ideas and talk about who you are. It feels outside of the comfort zone, so to speak, to be so public about your life. I think some of the ideas that I've been able to develop over the decades I've been doing this might be important to people, and maybe worth sharing, and maybe I'll find out where I got it wrong. Maybe people are going to react to it, be like, you got this wrong, and maybe I need to know that. It seems like there's some opportunity for progress in that as well. And yeah, so to me, it's about progress, not comfort. So if I get uncomfortable, I just say, there's a guy, a former Navy SEAL, his name is Jocko Willink. He has this book called Extreme Ownership, and he's meathead, bodybuilding, extreme kind of guy, as you might imagine, a Navy SEAL. And he's got this video that's just titled Good. And if you haven't seen it, it's basically, he just responds good to every bad possible thing that you can imagine. Lost your job? Good. Or don't have the resources you need? Good. And then he's got this thing, and it's like, I just look at it like that. Blew it with your company in your meeting? Good. Now you can reframe how that's a growth opportunity. Right. Went on Kim's podcast and got a bunch of negative comments? Good. Getting better every time you go, and you're learning what people like and what they don't. And maybe a lot of if there's haters, you just ignore them or whatever. But if somebody's got a constructive thing that you need to hear, like, good, let's have it. Let's get better. Like, I just have that kind of mentality and philosophy, anchoring the things I'm doing. And then I just kind of bring it on. Like, bad glass door review. Good. This is an opportunity for somebody to tell us how we need to get better and how we screw something up. Or good, we have a person who wasn't a cultural fit, who's no longer in our company, and the best that they can do is go vent publicly online. One way or the other. Either it's great feedback we need, or it's a person and an attitude and a philosophy we need out. But regardless, it's good. Or on the other hand, great Glassdoor scores, good. That means we're executing well for people, and so on and so forth. So I try to have that philosophy. Either it's a challenge that we can grow from it, or it's a confirmation, something we can really take with us and build on.
Very nice. You did it. Woohoo. All right. That was all of my questions. Thank you so much.
Can I say one last thing to your audience?
Absolutely.
Okay, so if you're hearing this piece of it, that means you made it all the way to the very end of Kim's podcast. I've been on a few podcasts now, and the one thing that I really want to say at the end is, if you made it all the way to the end and you haven't given this or subscribe, like, something's wrong. The whole world of social media requires people to do this. Like, you're socially confirming content you like, you're disconfirming content you don't. It's showing up more if you engage with it. So just a call out there, if you like Kim's podcast and you haven't subscribed yet, let this be the time where you'd be like, subscribe. Or if you like this thing, make sure you put a link in. Even better, if you didn't like something, tell us in the comments. Or if you like something, tell us in the comments. The engagement means the world to these algorithms. And it means that people are going to get this type of content instead of probably most of the garbage that they're getting out there that's making them unhappy and taken away. So just a call to your audience. Kim, I think you got really insightful questions, and I hope people acknowledge it, and wishing you the best.
Thank you so much. So this is Kim Miller-Hershon, Unconventional Wisdom about Conventional Wisdom, where cliches come to retire and fresh thinking we inspire. Do all the things that Mike said to do. Check out nSight, because it's a really good company. And thank you for listening. Go out there and be a better human.
Where cliches come to retire. Drop that beat. turned out